Hey everyone, I'm Christian from the Half Passed Out channel. Today we're doing a retrospective deep dive on a watch older than everyone in my house combined. This Longines Wittnauer 25.17 from 1953. With it, we've got New Belgium's Paloma sour, and it is absolutely delicious, so let's get into it. Longines has been making watches since 1832. During the 20th century, when this piece was made, they were most well known for their chronographs in the sporting world and their aviation provenance. They were the watch that timed Charles Lindbergh's flight across the Atlantic. This watch, however, was incredibly difficult to find any information on. After many hours of research, the closest example I could find was the admittedly more beautiful Longines hourglass. Finally, thanks to the awesome team over at Longines Heritage, I was able to find out why. A standard practice was for Longines, and I'm assuming many other watchmakers, to manufacture just the movement and ship it across to their agents that were local to the market. In this case, it was Wittnauer Watch Co. They manufactured the case and everything else. There is almost no chance that this watch and case combo is one of one, but it still feels like a special piece, not only in Swiss watchmaking, but as a piece of post-war Americana watchmaking. Since this is a vintage watch retrospective, I want to take the watch as a whole. This watch has the Longines caliber 25.17, and you can find other watches with this caliber available on the market, though very rarely in this casing or similar casings. This is a 10-karat plated case with a domed plastic crystal. Since it's a square case, the domed crystal does seem to jut out a lot more than I think it would normally on a circular watch. Though, because it was constructed in 1953 as a product of its era, it's incredibly lightweight. The case was well manufactured and, unless you're looking under a microscope, hardly shows any sign of varnishing in the material or the case. When you open up the case back, you actually find my favorite part of this watch, and I'm not talking about the movement. On the case back itself, engraved into it, are several sets of dates and initials. Based on what I can decipher from the chicken scratch that's obviously there, the initials are similar enough, the dates make sense that this was likely owned by someone who loved and cherished it enough that they felt it valuable to pass on to the next generation. That is what I absolutely love about vintage watches. When you own a vintage watch, you become a part of a long shared history. You become the next chapter in this watch's history that will continue down the line and be passed on further and further. This watch celebrated its 70th birthday back in January. Who knows how many times it's changed hands or been passed down since then, but now I'm honored enough to be the next one to carry it on, maybe even pass it on to the next generation myself. Now, let's talk about the movement, where we can get as close to possible as actual practical buying advice. From what I see, most watches with this movement have very similar design language. It's a basic 17-jewel movement that speaks to the simplicity of its time. Opening the back of the case, you'll see some gold accents around some of the jewels and the gold inlay for the text and the serial number at a nice touch of elegance. This movement has been incredibly reliable though. I don't have any service on the history of the watch, but from my research, these movements are very durable and can last a great long time. It's manually wound, and from a full wind, I generally get about 30 hours on the power reserve. Not sure what it was originally, but for a watch of this age, 30 hours is respectable. Some case builds may be quieter, but this example is rather loud and is the only watch I need to be careful with around my microphone, so it doesn't pick up too much of the ticking noise. This movement can be found in a lot of different styles, different case aesthetics, different dial designs, precious metals, the whole gambit. And if you're looking for one and can find it under $1,000, it's a pretty good buy. If you can find one under $500 and you're not picky about precious metals, I think it's a fantastic watch. Admittedly, it's not always the easiest to read, and the way the dials and hands are set up, it's kind of hard to tell what hour it is even when you're setting it. But let's be honest, if you're buying a vintage watch, it's more for the aesthetic than the timekeeping. So, under $500, I think it's a great buy. Beyond $1,000 though, I don't know. The market gets a lot more saturated. There are a lot of better options out there, and honestly, given the option, I probably wouldn't have picked it up at that price. So, practical buying advice? Maybe not. But it's a vintage watch retrospective. Thank you so much for tuning in. Cheers.